Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. My name's Tim Ringo. I'm Vice President for SAP SuccessFactors. I look after Europe, Middle East, and Africa for my sins. I travel a lot. A little bit about my background before we get into the content. I actually just joined SuccessFactors about 6 months ago, but I've actually worked with it for many, many years. I've been in consulting for the past 25 years. I was a senior partner at Accenture, and then I was led the global human capital practice for IBM. So I've actually implemented SuccessFactors, Workday, SAP HR, Oracle. So that's where my gray hair comes from. I've actually done this. It has been in the past, as you all know, pretty hard, but it has got a lot easier. So that's why I've moved over from the consulting side to software side, because mainly I think where things are headed, there's a lot less need for consultants because these solutions are fairly standard and fairly easy. Although I might get in trouble with my colleagues to put in, and I mean that relatively, because you remember back in the day, SAP HR, it was $50 million, it was 3 years. These, for instance, learning solutions can be put in a number of weeks and require almost no consulting help, something you can do yourself. So I think that's changed a lot. So I decided to get out of Dodge quickly, as we say where I come from, in Ohio, and come over to the software side. But in all seriousness, having implemented SuccessFactors, Workday, Oracle, the reason I joined SuccessFactors is because I do genuinely believe that, no pun intended, it is the most successful. I've seen the most success stories implementing SuccessFactors as an HCM suite, and the most success stories using SuccessFactors Learning. And that's, I didn't buy the company, but I joined the company, and that's really the main reason why. So I've just been here for 6 months. So what I'm going to do today is mix a little bit of kind of my consulting background, my stories of success stories with customers, in with a little bit about our solution. But also in the back, our booth is here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our CLO. Our Chief Learning Officer just wrote this book. It just came out, and this is her experiences using SuccessFactors and other learning platforms to deliver on sales excellence. So how do you do sales learning analytics? This is Jenny's book. And for the price of a business card, you can have one in the back. We're almost out, but after this, feel free to go. So I'm going to do a little bit about Jenny's book. I'm going to do a little bit about my book called Calculating Success, which is on analytics. And I'm going to tell you some stories about how I think, and I know, and I think you all know, learning can be measured. The effectiveness, not the cost so much, but the effectiveness of it and the value can be measured. So my goal at the end of this, I've only got 30 minutes, is to try to convince you that and give you the tools to go back and say, we can measure this and we can make the case to invest in new cloud learning solutions and make effective learning. That's my challenge for the day. But I'm going to start off with some questions because you can't take the consultant out of me, unfortunately. So I want to get to know you a little bit. So how many of you know how many people are in your organization today? How many employees and contingent workers do you have in your organization today? Raise your hand. A few. So about maybe 15%. All right, so of those people, how many of you know how many people you're going to need in 18 months from now? No hands. So that means I can't even ask my next question, which is what skills and capabilities will they need in 18 months? And therein lies the issue, really, right? That is the gap between what the business wants from us as HCM professionals and what we provide to the business, which is we can't do basic things like tell the organization or persuade the organization to implement a learning solution to get an outcome and then be able to measure it and describe it. And that's a problem because that is what the business wants from us. So let me ask you a couple more questions. These are a bit simpler. How many of you have heard of SuccessFactors Learning before or have it today? So quite a few. So how many of you know that SuccessFactors Learning is actually the Plateau platform from 5 years ago? Does anybody remember Plateau? It was the leading cloud learning solution. It was kind of the big one that all the analysts talk about. So just to kind of give you a feel for what SuccessFactors has from a learning perspective, it's the Plateau platform. So we didn't build something from scratch. We went and bought the best there was out there, the original cloud learning solution. So this has been around for 12, 14 years now. It is an established platform used by thousands and thousands of users around the world. So just to give you a little bit of background there. But let's back up And let's talk about something maybe a little bit more interesting. So these are what I call the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 8. These are the 8 things that I see, having been in this business for 25 years. These are the things I see going out from 2015 to 2020 that are going to drive why you need to think about learning and why you need to think about analytics. It's not an exhaustive list, but I think these are the ones that might resonate. So first one is drive. How many people have read, I keep asking questions, I know, but we're going to make this interactive. How many people have read Daniel Pink's book, Drive? Daniel Pink is an economist who's written, I think, probably the most important book on human capital management of the past 15 years. Essentially, what he's described is what we think motivates people in the 21st century is not true. So he's pulled together all the data that shows the more you bonus people, the more cash you give somebody to try to get them to work harder and have better outcomes, you get the exact opposite. They actually work less hard and they take more risk. And the science is very clear on that. And I won't let you just take it from my word. Read the book, and he has all the data in the back that shows the more you bonus people, the more you disincent them. And I can remember this from my Accenture days, where we used to spend 3 days in a room and try to figure out bonuses for people. And I always knew that of my 100 people in my team, I was only going to make 3 of them happy, and 97 of them were going to be pissed off with me at the end. And I used to sit there and say, why do we spend 3 days doing this when we know all it's going to do is make our people unhappy and demotivate them? And that is a fact. What people really want, and what he describes, are 3 things. They want autonomy, mastery, and they ultimately want to feel like they buy into the purpose of an organization. So, do I like what the company that I'm working for is all about? Tick. Do they give me an opportunity to master new skills? Tick. Do they give me the opportunity to go out and do what I know needs to get done to achieve? Tick. And if you have those 3 things, and the science shows that those 3 things, if you provide for your employees, you will get, one, you'll get to hire them for less money, and they'll be more productive. And bonus, yeah, it's interesting, but it's way down the list for them. Really what they want is ultimately some sort of buy-in to the organization. People prefer equity in a company if they can get it. So I advise a lot of my customers and clients to look at giving equity programs. People would prefer shares of a company or ownership of a company to a cash bonus almost every time. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail on that, but basically what I want you to go away with, what you think motivates people today, it doesn't. And our learning systems and our learning approaches encourage the wrong behaviors. So I'll let you read Daniel's book. It's way better than my book, so read his before you read mine. Second one is emerging workforce. So between now and 2020, there's going to be somewhere between 5 to 6 generations in work at once. First time in human history. Never happened before. And the reason for that is because we're all living longer. We're all living longer. And that is a fact. So when you look at it, so the Rolling Stones are out right now, yeah? In their 70s. They're rocking away. I saw Fleetwood Mac last week. Again, they're in their 70s. You couldn't have imagined that back in the 70s, right, or 80s, that they could be still playing these days. But fact is they're fit and they want to do it. And that's the same for the people that work in our organizations. They will want to work, provided they're getting autonomy, mastery, and they buy into the purpose. They'll want to work into their 60s and 70s because they're going to be very fit, and they're probably going to live to be 90 to 100. People who are alive today in their 40s to 50s statistically have a very high chance to live to be 100. So remember that when you're planning for your pension. I'm planning for 90s, so get into my 90s if I'm lucky, knock on wood. But that's a serious point. So what you're going to do is have people in their 70s, healthy, fit, ready to work, and you're going to also have 18-year-olds. And when you look at that, that's 5 to 6 generations, depending on how you count it. Never happened. So how are we going to provide learning for that? That's a really big question. And people talk about Generation Y and Z and ZZ, what do they want, et cetera. The bottom line is the research also shows, and we did research at SAP this year, that shows they want the same thing the baby boomers want. Don't buy into that, oh, they're different, blah, blah. They want the same thing, autonomy, mastery, purpose, and they want some equity into the company. They want to feel like they belong. Now, they might have slightly different reasons for it. The data does show that, but they are just like old people like me in that respect. So sorry if I'm offending anybody there. So that gets to the next point. Employer brand loyalty is going to be very important. And learning is going to be right at the center. People are not going to join organizations necessarily um, to for the glory of the organization. They're going to join it for the glory of themselves. They are going to be about, how do I make myself more marketable? And therefore, I will be loyal to you to the extent that you'll develop me in that idea. So the war for talent is not what we think it is. It's not a scarcity. Back to the point number two, there's going to be a surplus of people. The issue, and where analytics, learning analytics comes into play, do you know how many? Do you know how many you're going to need? Do they have the right skills? You're going to need the analytics to understand that. And the companies that are figuring that out right now, the IBMs of the world who figured this out, are doing very, very well because they can predict how many people they're going to need and what kind of skills they're going to need. They have a competitive advantage because of that. The machines take over. So we've been hearing this since 1780 that, oh my God, we invented the cotton gin, everybody's going to lose their job, right? And every time new innovations come along, the data shows over and over again that it actually creates more jobs, not less. They're different kind of jobs, right? So my father, who worked in a factory at General Motors, he couldn't do that today because there are no jobs for him to do that. But a lot of people can retrain and go do different things. And so this whole idea that somehow the machines, the software, the computing power is going to take over for humans, history shows over and over again, it's actually quite the opposite. So how do we retrain and create new types of workforces as software does replace certain jobs, right? That's what we as learning professionals have to get ready for. So the next piece, so social networking and collaboration, we'll talk a little bit about that, but the way people learn, this is one thing I think that Generation Y and Z have brought to us, is this idea of jamming, so being able to get online and collaborate and learn that way. And that is something that they've brought to us. And contrary to what people may believe, it's the middle-aged people like us, actually, we learn a lot from that. We're adopting that as well as an approach. So that's a good thing that the younger generation is teaching us. I'm going to skip right to the bottom to what I think is the most important here, which is what we're here talking about, which is the companies that figure out how to transfer and transition and interpret people data, just like you do customer data. If I ask you, and I won't ask you any more questions, but if I were to ask you how many of your companies are really good at quantifying the costs in the organization or quantifying customer behavior, they're going to be superb at that. Companies going forward are going to have to be as good at people data doing that. And I'm going to make the case for that today. So these are the sort of 7 or 8 things that I think are really going to be impacting us going to 2020. Okay? So some may believe, and you hear this all the time, some may say, failures, it's not an option, right? We have to succeed. But you would be surprised. I would count somewhere in my research that I've done that something on the order of about 94 to 95% of companies go on gut instinct when it comes to making people decide. I see heads nodding, right? You know what I'm talking about. Go on gut instinct. I mean, would you bet your job? Would you bet your house, would you bet it on a feeling? Not many people would, but almost all of us do. So there's a real issue there. So hope is not a learning value measurement strategy. Trust me, it doesn't work. It doesn't add value. So that's the thing we need to look at very carefully. Intuition is good. I'm not saying intuition's not something, but you have to have some data and some facts to back up your intuition. And usually those two together, those are very powerful. So I'm not knocking intuition at all. And we all know mothers know everything, right? So we know intuition works. So particularly when how we learn is evolving, I think as humans, we've let ourselves down in terms of our school systems. We actually provide learning starting from a very young age all the way through university in a way that actually the human brain doesn't work. It doesn't learn that way. But we set it up that way. It's all about, and you can, lots of conjecture why that is. But the good news is that learning is now evolving more towards how people actually learn, which is by doing, by experiencing, by sharing and collaborating. When I do speeches like this, I usually learn more from the questions at the end than I probably impart to you, right? And that's collaboration. And it works. It's very good. Where we go to learn is moving. I don't know if you play an instrument. I play guitar. And I've found YouTube incredibly helpful when I just can't get a particular chord progression down. I just go and find the guy who does it really good on YouTube, and then he shows me. And I can do this live if I'm doing a gig or something. I can go around back, quickly pull up YouTube, and say, "Oh, I got that now." You can come out and play it, right? So I'm learning literally when I go backstage and come back out again, and that's how our people are learning as well, right? So they are real time pulling up YouTube clips. But how do you access that without people having to go onto YouTube and all other things? How do we actually get that to them so they can use it? But that real-time learning is very, very powerful. We also no longer learn 9 to 5. I think that goes without saying. It's kind of happening all the time. And a lot of people are doing that learning down to devices, which means they can do it on the train or other sort of times when they have a moment. Who we learn from, as I said earlier. I learn a lot more from you. I hope you're going to ask me questions because that helps me. And then what businesses want is they want results and they want accountability. And we've got to be able to give that to them, right? So so when I used to go in as a consultant and I would speak to CFOs, CEOs, COOs, and CHROs, this is kind of the beginning of the discussion, right? When we say, well, we want to invest in a new learning system, usually the first thing is, well, how's that going to impact revenue and or profit and or operating income and ultimately net profit? Because these systems are not cheap, right? I mean, they're a hefty investment, and those days of just throwing money at stuff, that's long gone, right? That's pre 2008. Learning professionals and HR professionals have got to be good at tying the business case in to these things. And I'm going to give you at the end of this, so those of you who stay at the end, I'm going to give you the questions to ask. And you can take that away. The questions you should be asking yourself and your organization. But this is what the business wants. They do not want necessarily less training hours or cheaper training. The cost side of the equation for investing in learning, trust me, because I've done these business cases many, many times, is tiny compared to the productivity side. Usually productivity, and we'll come back to what that is in a moment, is sometimes between 5 to 10 times the size of cost savings. So you can sort of make a business case for a new learning system on cost, but it's going to be borderline. But when you do it on productivity, which is people sell more or they do something different, much bigger. And I'll give you some examples of that. So just a couple more numbers to throw at you, and then I'm going to tell you some stories about where people measured. So if you look at this, again, the organizations that use HR analytics, and this is from Josh Burson, somebody I've worked with for many years who I really respect. These are the sorts of figures that he's been able to generate with his group now in Deloitte. So, it's without question that business performance and HR effectiveness go hand in hand. But the ability to measure it is the key, and that is where, again, back to that productivity question, where that comes from. So let me give you an example. So how many people have flown Singapore Airlines before? A few. It's fab, isn't it? It's really, really good. And there's a reason for that. It's because back in the 60s when they founded the airline, they just kind of had this secret sauce of how they looked after people, right? So the customer service. And over time, they've been able to grow that in a way that allows them to charge premium prices. They're not the cheapest, are they? Usually they're much more expensive. But they can charge you a premium because you'll want to go on that service. You'll want that service, but also they fly to the places you want to go. So they've got a good combination. So I worked for the CEO and the chairman there a few years ago, and this is in my book, Calculating Success, which I'll give you the information on later. But the chairman and the CEO are two different people. The CEO absolutely understood that in Singapore, they have a mandatory retirement age of 56. And almost all of those people that were that secret sauce were going to retire within the next 2 to 3 years. And he was seriously concerned about this because he wasn't sure that what was in their heads, the secret sauce, had been taught to everybody else. And he saw that they were going to be gone very, very soon. There was no choice about it. The government mandated it. So we talked about how we could do this. And I came straight to learning. I said, look, we've got to get it out of their head and we've got to teach it to everybody else before they go. He said, oh, sounds expensive. I said, it is. It's going to be very expensive. I said, but the business case is huge on it because you don't have an airline if you can't somehow get that secret sauce into these younger people's heads. So we went to the chairman and said, the CEO, myself, and the head of HR went and said, look, we've got this idea that we're going to pull everything out of people's heads and we're going to teach it to everybody, but we have to invest $10 million, Singapore dollars, which is about $6 million US in a system that's going to allow us to pull it out and distribute it across 20,000 people. Chairman said, absolutely not. There is no way I'm going to do that. He said, that is a huge amount of money for a learning system. You've got to be crazy. So we said, well, tell you what, give us 500,000 for a pilot. We'll pilot a system with this knowledge in it. We'll roll it out on the planes. They had just got Wi-Fi on the planes at that point. Well, they'll have devices, they'll have Wi-Fi, they'll have a learning system, and they're going to collaborate and share what they learn. So the older people with the younger people. And so we set this up as a test control, right? And this is the key about measurement, test control. So it was scientific. The CFO and his team were the guys who measured this. So we had a group of people who didn't have access to this system and all this knowledge, and then we had a group of people who did. So how many people want to bet that the folks that had access did a lot better than the ones that didn't, right? It's pretty, but it wouldn't have mattered if we just said, oh, it was better. We had to get it down to the dollar. It had to be exactly what was the improvement in customer satisfaction, which all got measured. What was the improvement in duty-free sales? What was the improvement in the amount of space they had to rent in the airports, et cetera. So it was down to real dollar things. When we got to the end of it, and this is in chapter 6 in my book, the business case was massive. I can't give you the exact numbers, but I can tell you that the people that had access to the system performed 4 times better in terms of sales and customer satisfaction than the other group. We took that to the chairman and the CFO, no brainer, signed the check right there. So that changed the whole way Singapore Airlines looked at learning, because there was no questioning in it. It was scientific, it was measured on real results, and it didn't take $1 million. It didn't take 20 months to do it. It took 12 weeks and $500,000 and measuring it all at the end. And it made a huge difference to Singapore Airlines. And ultimately, this is 5 years ago now, Singapore Airlines has continued to be able to perform at the highest level of customer service. And it's because they've rolled out this learning system that they were able to share this information. So a real life story. Similarly at BT, so anybody who works here from BT a few years back, similar approach in customer service. We did the same exact thing. And I know I still complain about BT customer service. I can't fix everything, but we did a similar sort of thing where we measured the difference between sales and customer service and a learning intervention, and it did the same thing, and that's in the book. So these things can be measured, and they can be done, and I think that it really just takes a team to say, right, work together with finance, work together with operations, work together with learning and HR, and set out an approach to do it. And you can make huge inroads into getting new learning systems. So let's look at kind of the cost side for the moment. I think this is really interesting statistics. So this is actually this is about a year and a half ago, UK Commission for Employment and Skills Survey. And when I look at this, I kind of look at it and say, so what? I don't think there's anything really that stunning here. And this is kind of getting back to the point, which is that it's great that we all have to do more with less money, but this is about the maximum you can do. When you listen to the story I just told about the performance side, the side of productivity and increasing productivity, compare it against sort of expenditure on training and number of training days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even a massive recession doesn't have that much impact, really. And although this is interesting, and 54 billion pounds, believe it or not, is spent on learning in this country, it's still very small changes relative to the changes you can see when you're measuring the productivity side. But I can tell you what data analysis has also proven is that there's absolutely no correlation between course assessment scores and post-training sales performance. Revenue is the same, ramp time is identical, and percentage of improvement is equal. If you don't actually measure it, it's going to all be the same. But one thing that can be for sure, there is definitely a positive correlation between catering costs and the venue temperature. And that always comes across, right? So that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the happy sheets and go for the real stuff. And here's some real stuff. So this is in Jenny Dearborn's book, Our Chief Learning Officer, the book that's at the back that you can have a copy of. And I think this says it all. When you look down here, so a series of sales forces, and she's done lots of them from SAP to Hewlett Packard. She's trained big sales forces in her career, going from sort of tenure from 3 months up to 3 years. People can, without a lot of training, as long as they've got good sales management and they start to build their skills, they can do pretty well. So average annual sales, 351 million. That's pretty good. So pretty nice improvement there from 121 to 351. But when you put in a learning intervention, or particularly around sales, you can see the delta right there. Yeah, and that's the thing that what I was describing for Singapore Airlines. That's that lift, and that's a huge amount. If you look at it from 351 to 601, that's something like 150%. That is real value. That is the thing you can build a business case on. And that's what Jenny's been able to do very well. We've implemented SuccessFactors learning at SAP. So for me and my team, we take our sales training using e-learning and classroom based on SuccessFactors learning. And these are the sorts of results that we've been able to get over the years as well. So it's real. You can measure this. So let's just switch gears a little bit. So there's cost savings, there's the productivity side. We've shown that cost savings are good, but productivity measurement much better. There's a whole nother area that's really emerged in the past few years, rightfully so, in my opinion, which is that businesses showing and proving to regulators that they're compliant, that their people are behaving in an appropriate way. And we've all seen that since 2008. Again, all those a lot of bankers who got paid a lot of bonuses, right? Took a lot of risks, caused a lot of problems. So this has emerged as a really important part of learning as well. And I'm sure you all are cognizant of this. This is a little bit harder to measure because what you're measuring is risk and the avoidance thereof. But when you do get into conversations with people who know about avoiding risk, they do talk about big numbers. This is an area that I'm just now starting to do some research on. But I think, again, when you compare this side and the productivity side to the cost saving side, there's big numbers here as well. I just don't know what they are yet. However, this is emerging as more and more important as part of why would you invest in a new learning system. So SuccessFactors has some fantastic analytics that helps you show regulators very, very clearly that you're compliant in key areas. And this is important from the standpoint of, one, not getting fines, but I think the fines are actually lesser than the lawsuits and other things that can come as well. So this is really key. So it's not an area that I have a huge amount of data on in the moment, but it's an area that's emerging. I just wanted to log that with you. So let's kind of get to the kind of final points here, which is how do you go and make the case, right, to implement learning and learning analytics? They go hand in hand, right? I've shown you that if you're able to prove the value using analytics, you can get state-of-the-art learning. For me, it's kind of four things that I think you should be thinking about in your business case and your case for it. Relevancy, so right, putting the right content to the right people. That whole idea that I talked about earlier, that in 18 months you know how many people you will need and what skills, that is very relevant to a CEO, trust me. That will get his or her attention very quickly. Predictive, this is what a lot of people talk about, and I'm a big fan of it because I do think, again, that's important to be able to tell what you're going to need in 18 months. But I think persuasive analytics, what John Boudreau calls persuasive analytics, is even more important. And there's a good news story here and a bad news story for you. The good news, I'll start with that, is on analytics, because of platforms like SuccessFactors and Workday and others, you, as human capital professionals, do not have to be data scientists. That's the good news. You don't need to worry about that. These systems are automated. They do this for you. And it might be good to have a few, statisticians around to give you, but honestly, these platforms are very powerful. What you need to be able to do, and I'm going to show you some examples of our system, what you need to get good at is being the person who goes and persuades the organization on the back of that information to do something different. Your job is to sell the organization. That is key. That's why I've put it in red here. Relevant, really important. Predictive, fantastic. But if you can't change the way the organization thinks, 1, 2, 4 don't matter. And the investment you implemented doesn't matter. And that's a fact. So you really have to get good at not data analytics, but taking what SuccessFactors system gives you and going and selling it. And I'm going to show you why that's easier today than it used to be in just a second. I'm going to show you what our system looks like. Last thing is real time. That also is very important. Many of you have been through this exercise where you've been asked by someone in the business to get some data together and produce some reports. By the time you finish that, that data is out of, it's completely obsolete. I hate to tell you, but and I see smiles. Everybody's going, yeah, I know, I know. And that's the truth. And that's why this last one is important too. Just be able to get it real time. Yeah? So that's the vision and direction. Those are the four things that you need to be able to do. And as I said a moment ago, this idea of prediction and persuasion becomes possible when you have that as your starting point and as your mindset. So I'm going to start giving you a little bit of feel, but I think the other thing is access. So the great thing about these systems, these cloud systems these days, is the access is much easier. Literally, your boss and you and your team, if you have a system like ours, these are sitting on iPads. You are wireless. You are on real-time data. And if somebody says, well, hang on a minute, what was the number of high potentials that we lost last month or even last week? Tick, click, click, you're 3 clicks away, boom, there it is, it's on the iPad. And you can say, oh, okay, there it is. And the data is accurate, it's real time, and I think it's persuasive because it's simple. Part of persuasion is simplicity in the message. It is not good, and I've had lots of clients over the years that try to persuade me that their 164 metrics were a good idea. And you'll never convince me because you're never going to explain to somebody what 164 different analytics or metrics mean, right? Simplicity, 3 things, simple pictures, really, really important, down to the iPad. People can see that. That's what these solutions do today. And here you go. This is actual screenshot, and you'll be able to see it. Shabir is back here ready to do you some demos if you want to see it. This is what it looks like. This is probably not what you thought SAP looks like these days, but it does. So this is our the front end of our training of our learning solution. You can see a lot of it is about data, and these are constantly updating. And you can put whatever you want on your page for you or for your employees. But you can see the thing that's important here is it's all about people and profiles and about information that you can use to persuade other people or persuade yourself about what's going on in the organization. Really simple, integrated, straightforward. That's why these things, you don't need many consultants to do these things these days. And this is a little bit technical, but our solution polls, so you got SuccessFactors LMS here in the middle. These are all the different systems that you'll have. Our SuccessFactors learning system pulls from all of these and creates the embedded analytics, creates the workforce analytics, driving the learning analytics. So a big integrated system that puts the information at your fingertips. And so here's really the last point I wanted to make, and you may want to grab this. We can give those slides out as well. But these are the 10 things from my perspective that I think these are the questions you should be answering and or asking when you're thinking about how do we put together a business case for learning analytics in particular. These are the sorts of things you want to be thinking about. So alerts, so push factors, predictive measures, social learning, qualitative and quantitative, a focus on business outcomes. Cost savings, as I said, that's a small hygienic factor. The ROI, waste reduction, business insights. These are the sorts of things, kind of questions, and this isn't an exhaustive list. These are the sorts of things that you're going to need to be able to take a view on as you start to put your business case together. Yeah? Okay, so here's 2 things. So as I said, Jenny's book is at the back. Mine, unfortunately, at the moment is sold out in the UK. But if you leave us a business card, I'll send you a copy. So Jenny's is about sales analytics. Mine is 7 case studies of people who have done, so Singapore Airlines, BT. There's 7 stories in there, like I just told you, of organizations that do analytics really, really well. I'm writing part 2 at the moment. This one came out 2.5 years ago. The next book comes out next year on Harvard Business Review. And also, if we get your business card at the back, I will send you the white paper that the Calculating Success Part 2. I don't know what the name is going to be yet, but I'll send you my research that I've got right now, which is the latest on how are people implementing learning and workforce analytics, and it'll make up the final version of my book, so you can have a copy of the white paper. So 3 things you can have. Jenny's book, our CLO, my book, Calculating Success. We can send that to you, and we'll also email you my white paper. I'd love to have your feedback too. You can tell me now, Tim, this is the stupidest book ever. Don't finish it. Or you can say this is great, but have you thought about this or that? I'd really like the feedback. So saves me time. So that's all I've got. But I'm ready for any questions either now or afterwards at the back. Have a few minutes. So anybody have any questions before we wrap up? No free consulting before I go. All right, very good. Thank you for your time. Hopefully this was helpful and provides a few provoking thoughts. So thank you very much.